Who is going to win? Who is going to win?
Who's going to win?
No.
I'm asking you.
The question was directed to you.
I mean, first on the currency issue, I think most economists believe that the Chinese currency is undervalued by somewhere between 25 and 40%. And there is systematic intervention to keep the currency low. There was an agreement in Pittsburgh of the G20, which was a tremendously important agreement, and that was to end global imbalances, that the surplus countries would stimulate domestic demand, and the deficit countries, like the United States, would save more. That's only very, very imperfectly been accomplished. The agreement of the Chinese government in June of this year to appreciate, the RMB is only appreciated by 2%. You've got Japan intervening to lower the yen. You've got Brazil and Thailand threatening to put on controls to prevent investment dollars, hot money coming in. We're at a very dicey stage, and the G20 does not have the governing structures. It doesn't have a permanent secretariat. It relies on Sherpas who come together a couple of times a year. So when the leaders come together, they've got this enormous agenda which will be very difficult to resolve. But we have to avoid a currency war. Between 2005 and 2008, China appreciated its currency by 25%. That's what needs to occur now. In terms of the elections, everyone will be an expert on November 3rd, but I think the common wisdom is probably accurate, which is that the Republicans will take the House and the Senate will remain Democratic by a very slender majority, and that will have, and this is another speech, very, very significant implications for the second half of the president's first term.
Mm-hmm. It's not a good news. Sir.
No, with regard to the World Trade Organization, yes, there are all these mechanisms, the dispute settlement mechanism, but this only relates to trade. Now, WTO doesn't cover services and investments. That's a huge, huge area that is being left out of international economic exchanges. The other thing is that the WTO dispute settlement mechanism is a very lengthy and dilatory process, and decisions are not quick. And on occasions, certain decisions are taken. There is a threat to take the country concerned to the WTO, but in the meantime, the trade has been disrupted, and the time has been gained. So the mechanism is there. It's very important, as has been mentioned, because that's the only area in which there is some enforcement mechanisms. But generally speaking, I won't say that this is performing exceedingly well. Then, with regard to the issue of some new decisions in the G20 with regard to new institutions or enforcement mechanisms, I would agree with what has been said by Mr. Dervish, that countries are not going to agree easily on a maximalist program of action. It will essentially be minimalistic, where they continue to retain a wide degree of sovereignty over economic decision-making, which is directly related to their own economic welfare. So there will be areas where there is agreement that cooperation and agreement serves the interests of all. But beyond that, I think it will be very, very difficult. Even in the EU, if I'm wrong, please correct me, on taxation policy, there is not as yet agreement within the EU. So there are certain very sensitive areas on which I don't think countries are going to easily cede on their sovereign decision-making.
You want to add something, or should I take?
I think I need to.
If you can use that.
I need to respond a bit on some of the questions. First, about market economy status, I totally agree with the word double standard. I think it's, from our point of view, it's very very political. Because if you talk about governmental intervention, I think during the financial crisis, we've all seen lots of governments intervening heavily in the economy. As far as China is concerned, the reform is moving the government further and further away from the economic activities. The state enterprises in China is a legacy of the past. I think it was very wise for China not to let go the state-owned enterprises to anybody's hands. It's one of the success of China's reform. But all the state-owned enterprises in China have to operate according to the market rules. If you use the same standard for the countries which U.S., EU recognizes market economy, you find they are not more than market-oriented than in the Chinese economy. And interestingly speaking, that if EU use the 5 standards they're requiring from China to measure their own members, some of the members won't pass. So I'm not saying that China is not going to survive without the market economy status. We are growing into an important part of the global economy and the global market. What I'm saying is that this is double standard. And talking about the currency war, I agree with Stuart that we don't want to engage in a currency war. And I also appreciate what Stuart said about the feeling of the Americans. And but I'm also quite sure that the Americans have been in difficulties in their history many times, and they always come out. There is this spirit of fighting back. So I think in China, the popular view is that it's a matter of temporary difficulties. But what we are concerned of is that some Americans may try to seek solution outside the United States from other sources. And the economists all agree that appreciation of yuan is not going to help creating jobs in the U.S. because most of the products we sell to the United States are not made in the U.S. anymore. So either you will have to buy from other countries or buy it more expensively from China. That will add to the cost of your consumers. So this taking the currency, yuan, as the main scapegoat is not going to help you. For China, you mentioned the appreciation of renminbi for 25%, but if you look back at the trade relationship during that period of time, our surplus of trade with U.S. was growing. But in 2009, when we stopped when we suspended the reform of the currency, our trade surplus came down because of the financial difficulties. So you could see there's no linkage between the trend of surplus in our trade. We appreciate when President Obama was discussing with the Chinese president when he said he was going to revisit the restrictions in the United States about exporting high-tech products to China, which will help balance the trade more easily than forcing the appreciation of RMB. Thank you.
Okay.
If I can just have a brief rebuttal. There are 2 issues here. One is the actual economic impact. The second is the question that we've been dealing with here, which is emerging countries, as they rise in status, playing by globally accepted rules. In terms of the actual economic impact, the Peterson Institute, which I think is the best international economic institute in the world, recently did a study which showed very significant increases in economic activity in the United States and a narrowing of our very, very large trade deficit with China if the RMB would appreciate by the same amount that it did between 2005 and 2008. Second is the perception, and that is the notion that one country actively tries to peg its currency to the dollar in ways that favor its exports. That's not what we agreed to and what China agreed to at Pittsburgh in the G20. It was to end those kinds of global imbalances. And what has happened is, because of that artificial effort to keep the currency down and to favor exports, it's got now the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Thais, and others saying, well, we have to do the same thing. And that's what's dangerous. It sets off a cycle that really needs to be avoided. And I think Seoul at the G20 is a very important point. So it's not just the U.S. versus China on currency. It is Brazil and India and other countries saying this is hurting our competitiveness as well. We have to have a level playing field.
Thank you very much. Very candid discussion. Thank you. You were the star, I told you. Thank you very much, Thierry. Thank you. Really, it was great. And thank you to your people helping us. And all of them, they were great. Thank you very much.